Welcome to the Peopling Podcast, where we hang out with brilliant human beings who teach us how to be better, well, humans, and decode what makes us tick and click. Inspired by the book Peopling, available on Amazon. Let's get this episode started. Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Peopling Podcast, brought to you really as a spinoff from my book called Peopling. And it's all about connection and communication as we grow through every season of life. And I am ecstatic to be able to introduce you to a sweet friend of mine and somebody who's just going to pour so much wisdom into us today. And that is my friend, Janelle Elias. And she's clinically trained in marriage and family therapy and has spent years helping couples navigate high demand lives without sacrificing the relationship along the way, which is what a lot of us struggle with. She's also been married for 10 years. And so she's been juggling all of those challenges of a professional career, running a business, raising 3 amazing kids. And she understands firsthand the work that it takes to keep a marriage thriving in the middle of competing life stressors. Janelle, thank you so much for being here with us this week. I'm so excited to get some time with you like this today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So we got introduced a few years ago and became, I believe, fast friends. And there was something really just amazing about you and your spirit from the very beginning. And so I am especially excited to be able to introduce you to our audience today and also just have this time and conversation together. You have this background that is so vast and deep in psychology. So before we jump into our conversation about today, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, Kristi, I'm someone who has always been really family centered. I grew up in a very close knit family. I was always fascinated with the way people click, even like in high school, observing them. Why do 2 people connect and instantly become fast friends? And why do some just stay acquaintances? Like, what is that magic sauce in the middle that makes things work? As I grew older, I definitely translated that into families and relationships and marriages. What is contributing to this, at the time, daunting divorce rate? Thankfully, it has been coming down a little bit. But still, what does it take to make a marriage last a lifetime? And also just the legacy impact of being able to carry that on generation to generation, breaking previous trends. It's all really powerful stuff, and I love being able to work with it now.
Love that. What have you found? You're saying that you're observant, you're noticing these different kinds of behaviors. What have you found? Like, what's the one thing that's most fascinating to you? Not necessarily like your research or like anything that you've kind of compiled along the way, but like what drives you? You said you're very family centric, but like dive a little deeper.
One of the things that surprised me actually was initially when I approached all of psychology was I think where a lot of us start is the personality inventories and the tests and the data and the assessments. And we're wondering, how do we quantify this experience that is humanity, that is relationships? And then I find the more I actually got into, especially my first few counseling sessions as a student within counselor school, it was just how much decision and our will or our choices actually weigh on everything. Yes, you can have a couple that on paper is so compatible and they should make it the distance and they don't even last a year. And then you have people on paper that probably should not be making it and they have a great relationship that lasts a lifetime. You see those adorable little old couples doing the interviews. They've been together, they're 90 years old and they're like constantly nagging at each other like, I'm still with her because she still lets me kiss her. Why do they work? And it's really not about any special combination of features or things in our biology or the date that we were born or anything like that. A lot of it ends up coming down to the choices that we make, the behaviors we choose to exhibit every day. And that really fascinated me because that puts us in a lot more of a strong place of it's up to me. If I want my relationship to work, if we want this to work together, and not just our romantic relationships, friendships too, lifetime partnerships and business, everything, our children, if we're parenting, a lot of it just comes down to the choices that we make. And that's really encouraging.
Love that. So we've had some fascinating conversations along the way. And I think one of the things that is so very just, I don't want to say attractive, but like just magnetic about you
is you have this really incredible perspective. And you can't necessarily know that for yourself because it's your perspective, right? You're like, it's the only one I know. But you challenge me in the way that I see you approaching life and people and relationships. And you've asked some really extraordinary questions. I'm just wondering, like, have you always been kind of a deep thinker and really perceptive of other people? Like, was that deeply ingrained in your childhood? Do you think that was a part of your environment? Like, how does somebody wind up that way?
As Brene Brown says, the story I tell myself is that this comes from just, for me, how I explain it to me is just being such an introvert that peopling is quite the challenging subject. And so I've had to kind of learn it as a skill, not as a natural native tongue that I speak. And so, yeah, I became very observant and not just observant, but receptive of people around me. You know, some people would identify themselves as an empath. Maybe I wouldn't take it that far because I feel like I am able to not necessarily have to feel the feelings of those around me, but empathetic enough that I can pick up on the people around me, what might be going on. So yeah, I think just me trying to understand the world from that lens made me very receptive to the different flavors of people that are out there and how you have someone who means very well, but might say something in a way that comes across gruff. But if you stop to try to understand it from their point of view, that's actually them trying to be caring and maybe even loving or, things like that.
I love that you said that it's a skill that you're building. That was definitely me growing up. I feel like I could be in a room and kind of figure out my place, but I definitely know that I was a rough version of a human being when I was growing up. I think I put on this like armor to kind of I didn't know who I was. You know what I mean? Like I remember this very particular time, maybe in like junior high, middle school age, where I realized like I got to create or choose my personality. Like I get to choose how I show up in the world or how other people see me, how I see me. And I remember trying on different things. And I'll see that every once in a while now, like kids going through like their goth stage or they're, fill in the little the blanks of trying things on, like what fits and where do I connect in this world with other people, those kinds of things. I don't know that I'd ever categorize myself as an introvert, but I can absolutely see where if you feel more introverted, you are doing a lot more observing and learning from other people. But yeah, it's definitely a skill and there's a lot to be learned from other people. Okay, so you're a mom of 3 kids. You've got your business, your career, your marriage. And then I see you all the time on your YouTube channel sharing incredible insight and like your specialty, your heart is pouring into couples. So why couples? Like what drew you to that side of the field?
I'm so glad you asked that because I think as common as couples are in this entire population, right? I feel like single people dating takes so much more of the national attention. All of the advice, how to snag the person, how to land, how to get the ring, how to, get him to take you more seriously, get her to give you a second chance, things like that. Even in the movies, you have the whirlwind romances. The boy and the girl have the falling out. They chase each other to the airport, have the big confession, get engaged, and that's literally the end of the story. Nobody tells us what to do after I do. Or even if a couple decides that marriage isn't for them, once they become what I refer to as long-term committed couples, they're living together, they are in for a lifetime with each other. Where's the instruction manual? And there are some really great books, but we don't have that much, I think, social media attention around it. So I try to focus on those couples, especially the ones who are living what I call high demand lives. They're either running their businesses, dealing with health issues, with complicated family situations. They're out there trying to be driven and ambitious or even just make something of themselves from scratch. Maybe they're first generation college goers or starting their very first business from a legacy of immigration or something. But whatever the case may be, you're going to compound on top of how challenging it is already to last a lifetime with someone, all of these additional factors that can take such a toll on a person. It's a lot. And I do try to just put a little bit of clarity through the fog. I can't claim to know everything about everything, but we do have a lot of data out there that I feel isn't really getting promoted or put out there as much. I mean, happy endings are not selling quite as well as troubled relationships. So I hope to make a difference in that, and that's why I wanted to focus there.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So Hollywood has their version and then there's life, right? So I know just in conversations that we've had over the years, because like, for instance, you and your husband are both very, very driven in your businesses and your line of work. And you were starting to see like, if, especially if somebody doesn't have like a 9 to 5, right? Where you can literally leave the office at the office or your job at the job and come home and be completely present with your family there are probably millions of people that are either doing side hustles or their own business. It kind of seeps into our entire life, right? It creeps in on Saturday mornings, you're doing something on a Friday night, you put the kids to bed and you're going back to what you were doing inside of your business because we're working in our business and we're working on our business. And then over here, we're like, oh, hang on a second, I'm in a relationship. And if I want to stay in this relationship, I got to do something about this, right? And so it's like, how do we even balance? There's no such thing as balance, right? Like, how do we work through all of those things? And sometimes we don't even realize like the relationship is suffering until somebody comes to you and says, like, this isn't working out. And so I know your heart and your passion is to keep it from happening there. So is all of this kind of modeled on what you and your husband were going through? Is your inspiration, or you were just seeing really important people around your life and you're like, I got to fix this?
Thankfully, by the time I married my husband, I was already in marriage and family education, so I knew kind of some of the pitfalls to watch out for. And I was the weirdo that we were like 1 month of dating, and I'm teaching him communication tools and how to argue with me properly and what is and is not an acceptable apology because I'm not letting him get away with that kind of stuff. And thankfully, our relationship has thrived because of it. It has not been perfect. We have had to learn some very serious lessons along the way, and we still revisit some basics. But more than my current marriage is definitely, I've seen so many relationships around me, friends, clients, family members, that especially when they have that drive and those competing factors, the professionals, the ones with, and high demand doesn't always have to be success either. It can be someone with a lifelong health condition that they have to constantly be treating and dealing with flare-ups and, try dealing with the medical maintenance of that need on top of trying to keep any kind of career, plus a family, plus all the other demands. It can be a lot. And I've seen too many marriages around me crumble under the pressure. And even if we separate it a little bit, I mean, how many celebrities do we see or billionaire CEOs that start out married or in a happy family, and by the time they make it to the top, they're by themselves? It's lonely at the top. And I just don't want that to happen to anyone that I can possibly help.
I love that. Okay. So I've watched some of your videos and exquisite information. I'm just wondering like where's your inspiration? Is it things that you're going through yourself? Are you hearing this from other people and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is just like," because you mentioned there's a lot of books. Let's be real, there's a very small percentage of people who make the time to read.
Mm.
So I love that you're giving this information on YouTube and they are really impactful, hard hitting conversations that you're having with your audience. The one I appreciated the most was the apology. So I'm hopeful that you'll give us some breakdowns today, like some basic communication. I love that from month one, you're teaching the skills to who would become your husband on how to like fight fair and how to, have healthy conflict. And I think that a lot of people have never been taught that. And so they either avoid or they go all in the opposite direction on the pendulum of attacking or waiting until there's something explosive. So, would you mind sharing a couple of things that you think just like on the surface level could be really important? Like, for instance, your apology conversation that you shared.
Well, to answer the question of like where do I get the inspiration from, it's definitely a mix of things that have in my own life with my own husband. I am not shy about in those very videos explaining, hey, just the other day my husband says this, and this is how we reacted, and I probably shouldn't have said that. So here's what we did. Like, I'm going through it too. And we all get heated sometimes. We all kind of lose sight of taking the high road because we're a little too frustrated, and it's just human. Same with family and friends and clients. Sometimes someone will come to me with a certain situation, and I'm like, wow, that is such a good point, and not enough people know about that. We need to put that out there. Of course, I always make sure to change all of the details so that no one is ever put out there with their identifying stuff. But the heart of the situation, the examples, they're just too common. They're too real. So anyone can relate, even if we've changed the setting from an ice cream shop to the mall or something. But what's one of the common ones that could be most helpful? Let me think. Yes, there's great communication tools. Apologies. I actually told my husband when I finished doing that video on apology, I was like, did you watch it? Did you take notes? Because we all still need to improve on those things. He actually was very
One
kind
of
and
the
helped me. Yeah. He helped me demonstrate one of the communication tools at a recent video, and he hates being in front of a camera, but he was so sweet about it. It's just easier sometimes instead of going, well, person A says this, then person B, then we're back to A. And I was like, let me just demonstrate it with another human.
love
And he
that.
was super sweet about it. So I definitely encourage anyone, if they want to learn a little bit more about communication tools, check out some of those videos. But one of the, even beyond that, I actually did a video on this. There's a common misconception that we've all been taught that says that the key to a good, successful marriage or relationship is to just have better communication. And sometimes we fail to realize that communication isn't actually everything. I give the example of you take two people who absolutely despise each other and you teach them better communication skills, you're going to have two people who can communicate really, really well just how much they hate each other. So it's not going to fix everything. One of the more important things beyond just being able to communicate well, I would say, is being intentional about the relationship, as intentional as we strive to be with the rest of our lives. If we have ambitions, if we have goals, if we so much as want to get healthier and try to lose weight, and therefore we make a plan and we get with a dietitian, or we sign up with our local gym, or we create career goals so that we can stop working in our businesses and working on our business. Is that how that phrase goes? Things like that. If we're that intentional about everything else, why wouldn't we expand that to our relationship? And having those frequent sit downs with our partner where we go, hey, where do we want to go in 5-10 years together? Do we see ourselves as financially free? What does it take to get there? Do we want to travel more? How do we start doing things now, even if it's just saving up for them, even if maybe we've got small children and we don't have the freedom to be doing those things now, but what can we all start setting, the pieces on the board, setting into motion as of now, so we don't blink and 5-10 years have gone by and it was like the story in Up from the Disney movie. It was like the little jar with all the chains just kept breaking them. They never got to have their world adventure because life got in the way. You get the flat tires. In our case, our water heater just broke. So there goes another couple thousand to get a new one replaced. Like, just these things happen. But if we're intentional about our relationship, if we are constantly checking in with each other, making sure that our needs are both as individuals and as a relationship being met, then the marriage or the relationship is transforming along with us. We last a lifetime because we life-proof our relationship. No one stays the exact same person when they're married versus 5, 10, 20 years later. Kristi, you're not the same person you were 15 years ago, right? I'm sure
Thankfully.
your needs then would not be the same as they are now. And so we can't expect to get married once or say I do or move in together or whatever the case may be, and then focus on the rest of our priorities, our work, our kids if we have any, our goals, and just expect the relationship to be on autopilot and still be there for us 15 years later when we've reached a certain level of achievement, if we have, or wherever we might be in that place. We have to be transforming things along as we go. And the only way to do that is to keep checking in with each other and keep going back to that drawing board and say, okay, last time we had this talk, you told me you needed these things from me. I told you I needed these things, but now life has happened. Now, actually, these two aren't that much of a priority. Here's what I need instead. And continually having those check-ins, I call them running relationship vitals. That's what's going to get us across the finish line. And yes, that's when you use those communications tools. That's when you are able to use these things that we've all been learning are so important, because it helps make those conversations easier. But it's not just about communication for communication's sake. It's as a tool in the tool belt to get to the real point, which is making this relationship what we want it to be.
So you said so many amazing things right there. What I love, let me go back. You had the tools that perhaps your husband didn't start off with, right? So there's probably going to be one person in the relationship that may have gone to counseling or had a different kind of upbringing or environment that might be a little bit stronger in that part. And I love that because you're like, you're linking arms and saying, let's do this together. You tell me what your needs are and allow me to step meet them. I love that. The next thing I heard and kind of want to unpack is people change. And I've heard over the years, and I've had plenty of them. So I've heard over the years, like, he's changed so much. And I'm thinking maybe the problem is you've changed, but he didn't, right?
Mm,
Or maybe he changed and you didn't, but we go through this evolution, but it's never at the same pace as anybody else. Right? I shared with you the last time we got together, I'm starting school in a very short amount of time. I haven't been to college in 15 years and now I'm going to go back to it. And I know I'm going to be a very different student this time, because I'm a different person this time. And so I'm curious to see how all of this unfolds, but there's intentionality behind it in my time and the attention and what I want out of it for me and what I want to give. And so kind of approaching that same walk, I guess, with my relationships. And I'm guilty of this. And I'm probably not the only one. The relationships that tend to be closest to us are often the ones that's so easy to put on the back burner because we just know it's going to be there, and the water heater goes out. Now you've got that disaster to figure out. Mom or dad's not doing well. I've got to focus my time over here. Something's happening at my company and oh my gosh, we got to pivot and change. Like there's always something. Life is just about navigating. And sometimes it's easy to put our co-pilot off to the side and almost not appreciate them or take them along for the ride as easily as we want to or say that we're going to. What are some of the things that you see that like can you give a tip, a tool that could help us like if somebody's not sure how to even approach conflict? Maybe somebody's really comfortable with uncomfortable conversations and the other partner's not at all.
yes, you want a concrete tip on how to approach difficult conversations? Oh, that's such a good one. Because honestly, it comes down to that inner oomph that pushes us to step out of our discomfort zone. And unfortunately, and at this point, statistically, as far as the population of the planet, thankfully, those who tend to do the following are more in the area of the casually dating, not really taking things too seriously, then they tend to be the committed ones, but it still happens in this realm as well. You have a lot of humans on this planet that would rather sacrifice growth for the sake of comfort, right? That's natural, it's normal. So we want to put off that uncomfortable conversation. I don't really want to argue. I'm tired. It's been a long day. I already know what you're going to say. You've said it 20 times before. So let's just not have this fight. Let's just save it for another day. And by the way, that day is never. But for now, let's just save it. And what happens is that the relationship slowly erodes because you have usually the one that wants to talk about. They're seeking the closeness, and they'll often take the role of the nagger, the one who's pulling. Come to me. Let's get closer. I feel this gap and this distance between us. So I'm going to yank on you harder so that we can bridge this gap. And that tends to often create in the other person that escape, that need to run away because they don't want to feel like they're being controlled. They don't want to feel like they're being nagged. And then you have this like chase pattern of I pull, it pushes you away. We're not getting anywhere. So it's hard to give like a specific trick. Here's how you have those difficult conversations, because even if you muddle through them, even if you have zero communication tools, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're saying, but you're giving it a try, you're moving that much closer towards resolution, towards each other, than if you pulled back, but you've got all of the tools that you need. You're so eloquent and you've got great communication skills, but it's uncomfy, so we don't do it. You're not going to get anywhere near that. So it's really more about having that personal confrontation where we look in the mirror and you ask yourselves, we're back to that point of intentionality. What do I want? Do I want to be happy or do I want to be right? Do I want to be comfortable and save myself the argument for another day? but potentially end up alone 10 years down the line? Or do I want to sacrifice that personal discomfort for now for the sake of our relationship? Like, what are my priorities? And genuinely, Kristi, if someone's answer to those questions is, I just want to be on my own. I just want to have peace in my life. I've heard this one. I'm too old at this point to be living in a castle where, the king is constantly causing strife or the queen is constantly nagging at me. And if all I want is just a peaceful, quiet life alone, that is a perfectly acceptable answer. Then those are your priorities. Do that. Don't be dragging things along. Don't be, leading the other person on, acting like, yeah, I want us to work, but then not putting the effort because it's not really what you want. Make sure the actions are aligned with what you want. But if the answer to that question is, I want us to be happy and thriving and together and satisfied with our relationship 10, 20 years down the line, then the actions have to align with that. And that all takes a very hard conversation with ourselves in the mirror, going, in my case, Janelle, what do you want? And if what you want is for us to work things out, then you got to suck it up and you got to go in there and you got to muddle through it and trust that we're going to be okay at the end.
What you just said is so significant. I had to do some soul searching. I woke up one day and there were a lot of things in my life that I realized I was tolerating, and I didn't understand why I was just tolerating it. Like, why is it okay that I am 20 pounds overweight, or I'm not loving this part of my work, or I'm not loving that part of my relationship? It was you and I had this conversation a little while ago. 7.5 years, I drove a black on black car in Florida where it's summer 9 months out of the year, right? And I was just like, I will not go through another summer with black on black. It was, why did I tolerate this, And so I'm looking at some of these things in my life and I'm like, I don't understand why it was just because it was easier to ignore it than it was to face it. And sometimes I think that we avoid that conversation with that person in the mirror because of what can be exposed, right? Like, now I've actually got to put in work. I have to go and find the replacement car. I have to go to the gym and eat differently in order to lose the 20 pounds. Like, I have to put in the work now. And it's easier to just ignore and tolerate until you get to a point where you're like, I can't fit into my big girl clothes anymore. I'm not going to go buy a whole new wardrobe. So I guess it might be just human nature that we do this, right? We just kind of go through the movements because there's so many things that we're tackling at one time. And then we wake up one day and we're like, I don't want this. So in my very recent past, there were this whole laundry list of things that when I actually got eyeball to eyeball with myself and said, why are you doing this? Why are you tolerating this? Let's make changes, and actually started putting in the work to change it. On the other side of that work is exactly the life I want. But I had to create it rather than just fall into it, right? And that's what I hear you saying when you're talking about these relationships. It's like, it starts with me. I'm the one that's responsible for it. And it's funny because sometimes even when I'm mad at Andrew and it's all his fault and I want this very specific kind of apology that I'm expecting, and if it's anything different, he's fallen short of it, and I didn't even tell him what my expectations were, and I'm gonna make him wrong for it, like all the games that I play in my head sometimes. I have to look at me and say, what part am I responsible for? Because this is not 100% on him. He probably responded to me in the way that I said something to him that caused this whole like spiral to happen. And I don't know if you experience this even in your own relationship or the people that you serve through your counseling. I have found that we don't have a whole lot of fights. We have like the same 2 or 3 arguments. Do you see that common? Like, it's almost the same conversation on repeat.
Yeah, it's so funny because when you look at the research, it actually turns out the vast majority of couples' arguments are about nothing. We argue in circles to a point of exhaustion over nonsense. Like, who cares if you actually put the soap, and this is a real argument between an actual couple, who cares if you actually put the soap, the detergent in first and then the clothes? I understand. Actually, some people really feel strongly about this. This is like a toilet paper up versus down situation. But in the life scheme of like our entire life satisfaction in our relationship, is it really that significant? But we do. And call it human nature, call it pride, I don't know. But the truth is absolutely that we do tend to have these arguments that start out about one thing and seem to always circle back to the same key core issues. And that's actually something you want to pay attention to, because if you're seeing certain repeated themes, that's a good sign to start digging a little deeper, to be asking ourselves, where is this coming from? Why am I suddenly feeling this way? And something I tell a lot of the people I work with, my own family member, I've got a teenager, I'm training him up to be his own adult way sooner than I'd like. And so I tell them, in counseling, we have the phrase, the issue is never the issue. If you're seeing a reaction that is bigger than what the situation would dictate, and I'll explain what I mean, I'll give you an example. That's probably a good sign to pause and be like, whoa, hold on. Let's dig into this a little bit more. Where is this coming from? Why are we feeling this way? And a lot of the times it may be a self-awareness issue. I might not know why suddenly, it's my birthday and my husband gives me a gift. And whereas a normal reaction, even if I didn't like said gift, let's say a normal reaction might be like polite refusal, might be like, or not polite refusal, like, oh, thank you. You shouldn't have, like at worst, that kind of reaction, or at most like, oh, wow, this is so beautiful, but maybe bursting out crying or having like a screaming match over, I can't believe you would do this again. That kind of reaction is a little bit bigger than the situation I gave an example for, right? So if I'm suddenly reacting this way, it might be a matter of me pausing and be like, why did a birthday gift suddenly cause this in me? What did this trigger? Where did this come from? What daddy issue am I not thinking of right now that is causing this? And so we might have some self-awareness to do, but also my husband and I, we try to pay attention to each other. And if we see that kind of reaction in the other, it's worth the gentle, loving question of like, hey, what's going on? Because I think we're talking about two different things here. And maybe I do know. Maybe all I needed was for him to show me that he cared enough to ask, for the floodgates to open, and now I'm venting to him about, oh, well, it's just that my coworker said this, and I've been having these issues, and da 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 da. But it takes that question of pausing and realizing when the reaction is bigger than the situation would dictate, there's probably something else going on here, and this might be a good time to pause and dig into that.
Good. Simple, but not easy, right? Sometimes it's just easy to just keep plowing through the day. Keep to your schedule or go, no, not I don't know. I think that sometimes there are situations where we avoid the conversation because we don't want the floodgates, you know?
And we
I
might
know
not know. It's okay to take a few days to think on it and meditate and then come back and circle. As long as we do at some point circle back to the conversation, it's all right to not have all of the answers all figured out.
that's awesome to give yourself that kind of permission too, you know? I found myself a couple years ago where I made a really, really big mistake. Like I had a terrible misjudgment on character on somebody and put us in a situation where it was not good. And it was showing up in my whole being. It was showing up in our relationship. It was just kind of like in the way. But what I found was because of this really bad choice or decision that I had made, every time I had to make a decision, a big decision about other things, I was terrified to make a decision because I was just certain that I was going to make another big mistake again, you know? And it wasn't until Andrew stopped and asked me a question like, "What are you hesitating about? Like, it's this or this? And I'm not sure why you're not just choosing this. This makes sense." And it wasn't until he posed that question and I had some time to think about it. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm collapsing this prior situation with my current circumstances and terrified to make a decision because I've got this story that I created that I'm lousy at making decisions because I made one bad one. Doesn't mean I'm going to continue to do that, right? But it wasn't until he asked that prompted me to even do that work of like, what is the problem?
And
Yeah.
aren't relationships just such a gift in that way? Friendships, siblings, anyone, but especially significant others, long-term committed relationships, they act as this mirror for us that it was never intended. I'm the one coming in here with all the psychology knowledge, but my husband has so much innate wisdom and it's not just my husband, like you mentioned Andrew, and it's like there's something about being with someone who knows you so well that just their presence in your life acts as a mirror, and you have to look at yourself sometimes and they help you kind of reflect back, and they act as that catalyst that's like, oh wow, I never stopped to realize I do tend to do that, or I have been acting that way. And it's just such a gift, honestly,
It
as
is a gift.
frustrating as they can be.
As frustrating as it can be for sure, but, if we look at it from that perspective, like, not he's challenging me or he's questioning me or why do you always, we could look at it from that perspective, but the other perspective too could be like, he wants my growth. He wants me to feel empowered, like, we could see it that way and grow because of it. And, it's just perspective. If we get it right, we can continue to grow, and this is where couples grow together. But if we see it wrong, this is where I think that gap starts getting a little bit wider, and I stop relying on you, or I stop bringing you into the conversation, to help me see things like that in the mirror. Okay, so I've threatened a couple times about your apology video because that was the most recent one that I saw and I really enjoyed it. Would you mind just giving us a high overview, and they can go and watch the full one? But I think that really nailing a proper and intentional, kind apology can make all the difference in any kind of relationship. And I think that you have the magic sauce. You share it with us.
No pressure, right? Let me see if I can pull out this magic sauce in like 30 seconds. No, so apologies are a surprisingly complex thing because they do mean different things to different people. And there are excellent books on the nuances, but I did do my best to summarize some of the research on it in the video that you're talking about. I do encourage people to check that out just because if you've ever had the situation where someone is trying to apologize to you or you're trying to apologize to them, and even though you literally just said sorry, it just doesn't seem to be landing or be accepted or be good enough somehow, what that key is that we're missing, I address that in that video. So I think it's really worth checking out. I best way that I summarize it, especially with clients and with people in my life, is that it starts with me and moves to you and then addresses the us. And by that, I mean, I start with me. I take personal responsibility. I discuss how my actions, like what I did, I'm not passing the buck, giving excuses. Like I take ownership of my stuff. Then I move on to you and address how this affected you, especially mentioning emotions, like validating your feelings. And that is a very tricky exercise for plenty of people. But mentioning, hey, you know what? You're right. I dropped the ball. I should have done this task that I told you I would do. Didn't get a chance to for whatever reason. But clearly, this has disappointed you, or I let you down, or this offended you because it made you feel whatever kind of way. But like mentioning how this affected you and then moving on to us and like, what are the next steps? What are we going to do? What am I going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? Or what am I going to do to make it up to you? Or somehow, if necessary, circle back to, I apologize. Here's what I did wrong. I take full ownership of that. I see how this affected you. I see you in this. I empathize and I understand now how this could make you feel a certain kind of way. I'm gonna make sure that we don't ever experience this again by doing XYZ. That's kind of the magic sauce, if you will, but there's a lot more nuance to it. But that's how I tend to help people remember it. It starts with me, then moves on to you, and then we address the we.
It is extraordinary advice. I don't know that apologies are anything that's like taught in school. And it
Right?
certainly isn't in that relationship manual that none of us have. But there's certainty that we're going to hit some kind of obstacle in a relationship, whether it's with our parents, our kids, our best friends, or our significant other. Well intentions aside, there's going to be something to apologize for. And I see so many people, you said without making excuses, I see so many people make excuses, and I was victim to that. I would make excuses all the time. I would apologize and then say but, and then fill it in with all the reasons why, I did said thing. It was like everything behind that but just negated the entire apology. Trying to make everything or everybody else wrong rather than me just saying I messed up or I forgot or whatever the situation is. So that is extraordinary advice, my friend. I love it. What are some of the things that you feel are commonplace in relationships or conversations that if we had this like one extra tool in our toolbox could really shift things in our conversations or our perspectives?
Well, since we're on the topic of apologies and stuff, that's where my head is right now. I would say one of the big ones in this realm is that understanding that it really doesn't matter what happened. We talk about those arguments that are about nothing. Who cares if I left the keys on the counter or you moved them when you were wiping the counter down? The end of the day, I am running late for work. I am frustrated, probably from other things as well, and I cannot find the keys. And do the facts really matter? At the end of the day, no. You can be right or you can be happy sometimes. So it's really one of those things where the facts of the argument, the facts of what actually happened, I'm apologizing because I did XYZ. Doesn't matter. It's how it made you feel. It's how you're feeling right now. I'm frustrated right now. And whether you're at fault or I completely made up the situation in my head, I actually have ADHD, which impacts memory. And I may have absolutely forgotten that I moved my damn keys and I put them somewhere else. Doesn't matter. The point is that if you care about me, it should matter to you that I'm feeling some kind of way, whatever that may be. And we're going to validate those feelings and we're going to see what we can do about it instead of getting bogged down in the facts of what actually happened. Who said what? Oh my gosh, earlier in my years, I wish I could be walking around with like a recorder, filming some of the conversations that I would have with some of my loved ones so that I could show the evidence that I really did say that and you really did respond that kind of way. But it doesn't matter. The point is that you're offended now or you felt disrespected. So whether I meant to, whether I actually said what you think I said or not, the point is I'm sorry that you feel disrespected. It's actually not okay for me in my own mind that you currently are feeling disrespected. That wasn't my intention. So let's address that because how a person is currently feeling matters way more than the facts of anything.
That is extraordinary advice. What we're left with, what we're feeling, intentional or not, is really the most important thing. And I think that there's something very, very special, this covenant between our, the significant other relationship. We're able to expose those parts, those deep parts of ourselves that maybe with somebody who's not as close would feel the potential for judgment or uh, where I might feel a little bit of shame, but you can see me, you can see past that and see it as part of me, but not the sum of me and still love me through it anyway. And we don't want a miscommunication of he said, she said, or even like roommate situations, right? I hear people fight about the dang toothpaste top, and it's just like that you actually need to address with your roommate. You're like, no, but that's my spouse. Yeah. Yeah, I'll live together. And you have this other side of the relationship. And we almost want to, I don't know, you can't physically separate it, but don't bring the roommate situation into like the romantic side of it. Those can be separated a little bit. You could say, hey, when you're in the bathroom, I'd really appreciate it if you could fill in the blank, right? And then that doesn't have to get in the way of everything else. But it's funny that the multifaceted layers that exist in our relationships with our significant others. Do things get easier through time if we do the work? Like I know somebody right now who's been married for less than a year and they're at each other's throat. And I'm like, I know who you should speak to. Because they haven't figured out the words, the systems, the processes, the plays. Or do you find that people that have been married for decades still have some of the same problems that they had at the start of their relationship?
Yes, and let me add that the thing you mentioned about the roommates reminded me that this thing about caring more about how someone feels than the facts should apply to all of our relationships, really. Even in business, they say people don't remember what you did, they remember how you made them feel. That's the case with our friendships, with anyone really. If we want to people well, we should be putting more of an emphasis on that kind of thing and focusing on the feelings of how they feel versus the facts of it. But does it ever get easier? It changes. It could be argued, and some will say this, that earlier in the relationship, it's easier because you have the passion and the intrigue and the mystery, and it's all new and it's fresh, and you feel the butterflies in your stomach, and there's this want to be happy together because you're, so caught up in it. And versus later on in life when some of that excitement has dwindled down and now you're having to make things work because you choose to and you have no other motivating factor, nothing driving you other than just the fact that you want the relationship to work. So I guess we got to do the work now. Alternatively, it could be said that you guys know each other so much better as you go along. So the misunderstandings maybe in theory could be less. It could be like, well, I know what they mean when they give me that look now, so I'm just going to preemptively do this with that. And they're both true. Like all of these observations are true. It's really not that it gets any easier or stays the same. It just changes. At first, we're having conversations about how do we use the toothpaste. My husband is a classic squeezer. And I am a roller. Let me tell you how we had to quickly learn to just buy 2 sets of toothpaste and have peace in the household. We don't fight about the toothpaste now, but
Love
I'm not
that.
looking forward to the day when we start having conversations about how do we take care of our aging parents and how do we handle, other life obstacles. It's not going to necessarily get any easier. It's just different. And so I think the more you practice these skills that help us get to the core of whatever the solution is, which a lot of the times, let me tell you, marital discussions or relationship arguments sometimes they don't have solutions. Sometimes these things just kind of either resolve themselves or just stop mattering as much. Not everything always has an easy answer. But practicing more of the skills that helps us do these conflict resolutions better, have these harder conversations, maybe take less time arguing back and forth before we finally get to the heart of the matter kind of stuff, does make getting back on the same page a little bit smoother. But it's a lifelong journey. It does get easier and it also does not.
Yeah, it presents new sets of challenges and new kinds of conversations to work through. Being with my significant other now for 13 years, we worked through the toothpaste situation. I had to let something go. I thought earlier in my life that my perspective, my approach, my idea was the one. And if you're going to be in a healthy relationship, you really have to see your partner as that mirror that you're referring to earlier and be open to another perspective, like truly consider it. You were talking about validating. I think the most disvaluating thing that somebody could do is just not even consider a perspective from somebody when you're having those really big conversations. Those hard things to have to work through. You have to give consideration to your partner's perspective, even if you don't agree with it at first. If you just toss it away, they feel they feel like why did I even share? Why did you even ask? Why did we even spend this few minutes together? But really truly considering somebody else's perspective and not holding on so tightly that I have all the answers. I think that was the biggest growth thing for me is that I don't have all of the answers, or the answers that I thought I had weren't as good as I thought they were once I heard what he had. But I had to be open and receptive to really receiving and hearing his perspective of it, because I was that person that just rejected it at first. And then the next day I'd had some time to process. I'm like, hey, remember that thing that you said? After I made him feel lousy, because I was like, no, that's not going to work at all. Right? So approaching that conversation, I think, is one of the most kind things we can do for our partner, is really being open to whatever it is that they're trying to contribute, even if you don't wind up going down that path with their suggestion, right?
And let me tell you something of a little bit of encouragement here, not just for you, but for what you just described is very relatable. So for anyone who has experienced that feeling of like having to come back the next day and be like, okay, so actually, thinking about it some more, research has showed us that two people in any kind of friendship, any kind of relationship to each other at all, will report feeling closer to each other after having been through some kind of an argument or a tough time together than two people who, for the same duration of time, never went through anything difficult. So sometimes we tend to feel like if we fight, our relationship is getting damaged somehow and it's just going further and further into the gutter. When actually, if we handle it correctly, and that's the part that takes some practice, right? That's the skill that we need to be constantly working at. Our relationship can actually be closer and stronger than ever. And I'll give a very uncomfortable example. It's relationships who, through various situations, end up experiencing betrayal or an affair. They think for the most part, that's it. The relationship's over. It's done. It can't be fixed. And sometimes that's absolutely true. But other times, a relationship that properly goes through filling in the holes and the gaps and the potholes that led them to that breaking point in the first place, along the healing journey, really doing the work to come back from it correctly, end up so much stronger and so much better off after having healed through all of that than if they'd never been through it in the first place. I'm not encouraging any of this behavior, but the point remains that we can come back from mistakes, from saying the wrong thing, from coming across the wrong kind of way, from maybe snapping at our partner. And if we do the repair work afterwards, we'll be that much stronger for it.
I love that. As long as it's not like repetitive constantly, right? Like if it's a pattern all the time that somebody is, abusive in the argument, that physically saying things that are putting you down, and then you apologize, you fix that, but then they go back to that behavior. That's not okay. And I'm making sure that everybody hears what you're saying. Is like if you go through the thing and you work through it, and then that doesn't have to happen that way again. There doesn't have to be betrayal. There doesn't have to be that depth of the fight, because you learned how to fight fair.
I appreciate that clarification. Yes, when I say do the proper repair work, that includes genuinely experiencing remorse and taking the action to correct it to keep it from continuing to be a pattern. If someone keeps making the same mistakes over and over and over again, I would argue whether or not they're really being sincere in trying to fix things. That's not the example we're talking about here. So
Yeah,
thank you for making
right.
that clarification.
So good. I love that. There's hope for something even more in depth and life on the other side of a hurt, if you can figure out how to communicate and work your way through it. And that's really where, professional help comes in. And that's why I love being able to extract this from you and getting your perspective. I love this conversation so much. So thank you so much, Janelle. All right. It's time for our last question. And I love this part because I know you're going to say something that's going to be really impactful, but I also don't like this part because this is the basically conclusion of our conversation. And I could talk to you all day, my friends. So we love to talk about the Be the Change Challenge. There's a section in the Peopling book about be the change. And we can't always control other people, their behavior, their words, their whatever, but we can control who we are and how we show up in the world. And so, what is one piece of advice that you could leave our audience with where we can be a better version of ourselves to our sphere, our friends, our family? What's one thing that you could share with us that we can implement into our being this week?
Hmm. That we haven't already mentioned?
Yeah,
Because
or
we've
maybe
brought up so many good ones.
I know.
All right, let me think.
I can edit this part out, but let me think, like, is there a secret question that somebody could ask that might, like, squash what's happening right now and help connect really, really quickly in, when to a lot of times when we're under pressure, time constraint, use that example, running out the door, can't find my keys, and I'm already late. Sometimes we show up as a different version of ourselves, you know? There's something that we could be mindful of when pressure's on, like that pressure cooker is starting to kick in. A lot of things are happening. We're exhausted. It's the end of the day. We started a silly little argument or
Mm,
fight. Like, is there a pivot to kind of shift where we're at in our stance together or
okay.
conversation, something like
You
that?
have inspired an idea. Thank
Cool.
you.
Ready.
Hold on, let me think how to word that.
Take your time.
So, well, how was the question worded? Is there one
Is there like
takeaway
one
or is there?
actionable thing that we can
Okay.
use into our life this week?
So, one thing that I have found to be very helpful for me in my life, and I definitely recommend it for anyone, is to stop and check in with ourselves. How is the other person potentially experiencing this right now? Or how are they feeling right now? Something that happens to me a lot, because I run my own business and I do so much stuff and I stay so busy, is that it's really easy to get caught up on. I wake up and I have to do this and this and this, and here's the to do list. And oh, by the way, did you remember that? And sometimes treating our partners like business partners and less so much romantic partners, but not even just our romantic partners, also the people we interact with on a day-to-day basis, but pausing to be like, wait a minute. It's been about 3 days and I've been so caught up in this fire that I had to put out that I don't think I've asked my husband how work is going for him. How's he feeling lately? Or the person that I'm speaking to across the way, I know I'm in the right because I've got the documentation to show that they've misunderstood the contract or whatever the case may be. But how are they perceiving things right now? And just pausing to try to see things through their point of view can make such an understated thing. It can make such a difference, to the point that one of the most impactful things I've learned working with couples, I've lost count how many times I get a couple that walks through the door, they sit in front of me, and as I'm trying to understand the situation, just trying to gauge like, okay, what are really the issues here? What are we going to be working on? a simple question I'll ask is just on a scale from 1 to 10, each of them give me your answer at the same time. How satisfied, how happy are you right now in the relationship? And it does not fail that one of them's like at a 7 and the other one's at a 3. And the one who's most satisfied in the relationship will look at their partner and go, what? Either they're so shocked that they think the person is like lying just to make a show in front of me. And they're like, why are you suddenly acting this way? You are not that unhappy. Please, I would know. Or they're surprised and they go, why did you never tell me you were this unhappy till this moment that we're now sitting in front of this person? And it's like, it's so easy for us to just go through the day to day and not stop to check in. How is this other person that I'm sharing a life with or that I'm having a conversation with right now possibly feeling? That we could live years with someone and never realize they were absolutely miserable this entire time. Not because we don't care, but because we're just so caught up in our own stuff that we just forgot to stop and check in. So the number one thing I would encourage you is if you just try to remember, I try to check in with myself frequently, look over at that person that we're speaking to, neighbor, friend, family, cousin, significant other, and go, what was the last time I checked in with them? Or if it's like someone that we don't speak to very often, how might they be feeling right now? And it just helps not only increase empathy, but also helps us realize some of our own blind spots. And we could even ask them, we could say, hey, I'm perceiving this conversation going this kind of way. Is that what you're picking up too? And if they come back with, actually, no, I'm experiencing it this whole other way, it can make such a difference in making sure we end up in a happy resolution for both of us and also just improve the quality of our relationships overall.
That was extraordinary. We go through life and just, next, next, next. And to pause and check in is probably the greatest gift we could give to that person in our life in that moment. That was so deep and something I'm going to do right now. It's the next thing I'm going to do. As soon as we wrap up here, I'm going to check in with my honey because it's really clear to me right now that I haven't in a little while.
We all do it.
Right. My gosh, if we all did that for each other, with each other, how different would our lives be, Yeah, the mundane becomes special, even in just the normal rhythm of the day. So I love that. Janelle, thank you so much for being here and conversation and sharing all that you did today. I can't wait to get more videos from you. Thank you for the hard work that you're putting into your YouTube channel. Every single time I watch one of your videos, I leave with new tools and tips. Strongly recommend you can get to her YouTube channel in the show notes, and we've got her Facebook page and those kinds of things where you can connect. And please do follow her because if you are in any kind of relationship, she's got extraordinary tools to help you along through it. And that way you can connect with her there. Thank you so much for being here with us, and we'll see y'all next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Peopling Podcast, and grab your copy of the Peopling book on Amazon, and let's keep this connection movement going. Until next time, be curious, be kind, and keep peopling like you mean it.